everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Matthew, thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have a good chat.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I love to do, right, before we get to who you are today, because you're making a difference in people's lives, and that's what I love, I want to get to know who you are. Where'd you grow up? And I always ask this question. I don't know why. It intrigues me so much. Who influenced you before the age of 10?
Oh, that's a great question. That is a really good question. So, give you a bit of background. So, I'm a Canadian through and through. Born in Montreal, raised in Ottawa. I'm a first generation. My father was a refugee. My mother's an immigrant. So, to give you a bit of a background, we did not have it easy. Definitely came from a lot of struggle, a lot of having to figure it out. But, to tie into that, I think the person who influenced me the most before the age of 10 was my father. My father was an entrepreneur, both successful and failed on multiple accounts. And just seeing, not just from a business perspective, but how he conducted relationships and how nothing in his life was transactional. Everything was relational is something that just got embedded in me. And it's really something that I think until a few years ago, I really, not that I took for granted, but I didn't really acknowledge that was the source of where it came from. So I would say for so many reasons, my father was probably the person that I looked up to or had the most impact on me before the age of 10.
Yeah. So a true entrepreneur is someone who knows failure, right? But then gets up and keeps going. And that's really what an entrepreneur is. Somebody who's not afraid of taking a chance. Because the minute even if you don't label yourself, the minute you go into your own business, doing your own thing, boom, that label is applied to you, whether you like it or not. But then the actions that you take is what makes you either a successful entrepreneur or one who's still going for it, right?
Totally. I used to use the line, I said, guys, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm really comfortable with failure. I'm really comfortable with failure.
Yeah. I think failure is the one that teaches us the most. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've come to learn about failure is that failure in and of itself is actually not a bad thing. We assign emotions and we assign a negative value to failure, but we get to choose at the end of the day. Failure can either be finite in that we're done, right? It can either be something that we lean into and we learn from and say, this is just temporary, or failure can actually just be something where you say, I acknowledge where I am, but I'm going to soak up as much as I can. What are the lessons that I can learn here to make sure this never happens again? And so, yeah, listen, none of us want to go through failure, but I think it's more a perspective on how we approach it that determines what failure actually looks like in our lives.
Yeah, this morning I did a show on adversity and how we need to actually, the great thing about adversity is that it teaches us how to hone in on our resources so that we can justify our next actions from that failure, right?
Oh, yeah. I love that thought. That this idea that failure, hardship, adversity, these things actually, in many ways, prepare us for where we want to go, right? I was coaching someone the other day in their business, and I said, if the success you're experiencing now, if you had experienced it 5 years ago, what would have happened? Because everybody obviously wants everything to happen. We live in a microwave culture, everything instantaneous. And they looked at me and said, it would have broken me. And I was like, So there's a reason you went on that journey. There's a reason why, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you experienced failure and you harnessed rejection. Because had you experienced the success you have now, then it would have broken you. So yeah, adversity just plays such a key part in building that resilience and tenacity in us.
Yeah, without a doubt. You know, sometimes people don't realize that there's a need and a want that we all have, right? We need food. We don't need junk food, right? So we need the food to survive. We don't need the junk food. That's a want, right? So the age of 10, dad was the biggest influence for you. So you were you able to ever go and see how he negotiated any of those things? Because man, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Oh, listen, all the time. So, up until the age of 12, my father he was in the restaurant business. He had multiple restaurants. And I have memories of, it's a Friday night, the restaurant's busy, and my dad takes me and he just puts me on the freezer and he's like, don't move. Do not move. And, naturally I'm a curious kid. So I'm doing all the things. I'm going up, I'm talking to people. I make my way to the front. I'm trying to meet customers. And it was in those times that, again, rather than any dialogue that my father had for me, it was almost like osmosis, where I look back and I'm like, I saw how my father handled stress. I saw how he took care of people. I saw that, like, he would snap into business mode and everyone had this respect for him that wasn't because he, was, hey, respect me, or, he didn't have to say those things. He was just so relational that when it counted, people showed up for him. And so, things like that just really stuck out to me. His work ethic was incredible, probably to a fault. My father taught me boundaries at a young age. But yeah, just honestly, I got to experience that stuff. And so rather than my father said, hey, this is how I negotiate, I just got to see it. And that osmosis was wonderful. And so much of that was just free education for me. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love the fact that you talked about that your dad was relational, because I think that that's what made him successful. Because without empathy, if you will, to understand that, hey, if I'm going to relate to you, I understand maybe you're having a hard time. How can I help? How can I assist? Instead of saying, hey, just do what I told you, right? And there's no empathy there, because you don't know where people are coming from. So I think your dad was an amazing human being, as far as sharing that knowledge with you without realizing he was sharing it with you, maybe because you were just there, right? So by osmosis, you said you were being educated, which, my gosh, that is the best possible education if you're alert, right? If you're alert, if you're noticing it. Maybe
uh,
at points you were not, right? Because you're like, whatever, I want to play, I want to do this. But then other times when you reflect back, you go, holy cannoli, now I understand, right? Has that ever happened to you, where you reflect back and you go, oh my God, now I see it?
all the time. And, like, I find myself either making fun of myself or being made fun of for it. But I find myself so often, come to these moments where I'm like, oh man, like, no one ever taught me this, but it's osmosis. I saw my father do it. I was immersed in it. And, I would have been too young for my father to have sat down and given me a 5-point discourse on why relationship is important in life, right?
Right.
But it's how he lived. And so, one of the things I work on with some of my clients from a leadership development perspective is we live in a culture of mottos. Everyone's got a motto. Everyone's got a slogan. They've got something that they want to tell you. And that's great. We need mottos. But what we need more are models. And rather than my father give me a motto, uh, everything rises and falls on relationship, he just modeled it to me. And that model over and over again is what I'm left with in how I try and live and how I try to inspire and help people, because I found it to be so powerful, because I saw it in action. I saw the results of it. I saw the hardship of it. And so I get to live by the model that he set. And that really, really, really influenced me.
Nice. That's beautiful. So tell me, from the age of 10 to 20, I'm going to leave your dad out of the equation now, right?
Taking them out.
Well, we can't ever take him out, right? Because he's in you, right? No matter 50 years from now, he's still in you, right? No matter what. But let's consider someone else outside of your family who may be impacted the way you do things today. Who would you think of?
Yeah, I ended up having a mentor, especially in that latter stage of that age range, who basically recognized that at an fairly early age of me and said, "Hey, you have a lot of potential. You are." He basically framed it as, you've got a lot of potential, but you're living on your talent. And he would pull me
You
aside
kind of cut out on the last thing you said. You're living on your
on my talent, right? On my
talent.
charisma. And he really, at an early age for me, really, he really started to be, I don't want to say hard, but he was formative in that he was like, you focus a lot on being clever, you need to be clear. And so we would go down this road where he was like, hey, your charisma is fantastic. Your communication is, it's good. You're going to get in the rooms. You're going to win people over. But once you've won them over, what do you do with them? How are you going to help them? How are you going to deliver? And again, because I'm not one that learns quickly, let me tell you, similar to my father, it took me a few years before I actually really immersed myself and fully understood everything, the weight of what he was saying. But I would say that yeah, that relationship, that mentor relationship, was one that really, really has set me down a path of where I am today.
Nice. So now, when we talk about a mentor, was this a family friend? Was it somebody outside at school? Who was this person?
No, it was at my church, actually. Yeah,
Oh,
it
nice.
was one. Yeah, it was at my church. It was one of the pastors, and it felt like we ended up building a friendship, but it definitely extended outside of just a normal I go to church relationship. In that he very much he had this thing about him that he was really good at being able to help develop people and help them reach their potential. And in all of my, late teens, early 20s arrogance, was like, I don't need that. I can figure it out. But again, the intentionality of him to recognize that there was something in me and to work with me eventually blossomed into a friendship, and it was really, really impactful.
So when we consider what you just said, and I love that you said that, is that you were given advice, but you thought, I know it. I don't need it. I'm good enough. Right? Talk to the hand, because I actually, I'm good. I don't need it. But at what point did you realize that the advice that you were getting really was something you needed to pay attention to?
Yeah, hardship.
Was it a
Right.
moment? Talk about that.
Yeah. So for me in 2012, I got into a horrific car accident. I was driving home late one night in the Canadian countryside. So, it's the country. Houses are pretty spread apart. And I was driving home from a girl I was dating at the time, her house. We're a few minutes to midnight, and two horses jump out onto the road. And I don't know if you know anything about horses. I certainly did not. But collided with them. The car spun around. It killed both of them instantly. They were Clydesdales. They were bigger than the SUV that I was driving.
Wow.
And when they measured, it was 3 inches, and I would have been dead. 3 inches, and it would have just launched me. And the aftermath of that left me with injuries, disabilities, chronic pain, some of which I still struggle with till today. But while I would never wish that on anyone or wish kind of that aftermath on anyone, that process of pain, that process of being alone and struggling and suffering gave me a lot of time to reflect and a lot of time to really slow down, which was not my norm, and appreciate some of the things that I want to believe I took for granted. And so that accident actually gave me an opportunity in my life to recalibrate and come to this place where I said, if this is going to be how the rest of my life is, then whatever freedom I have, whatever time I have where I don't have headaches, where I don't have pain, I want to squeeze every ounce of it.
Mm.
And that's where I really started to dive into, some of what my mentor had told me, some of what my father had told me. And I really went down this journey of personal development and personal growth.
Mm. Incredible, incredible. I could not even fathom what you went through. Not only the physical aspect, but the emotional aspect of it. I lost the ability to walk when I was very young. I had polio, and I recaptured that ability later on. I wore braces like Forrest Gump from the movie, if you remember that. Yes, and I did like chocolate. Um, but this is why I work out every day, right? Because I lost the ability to be able to walk and slowly regained it, but I never gave up on myself. And that mental resilience that you have and that I gained as well is something that not everybody understands, right? It's something beyond what we could even have imagined. Like you said, you would never wish that upon somebody. And I immediately knew what you meant. And what you meant is, and tell me if I'm wrong, you don't wish it upon anyone else, but it's made you who you are today.
Totally. Yeah.
Same for me, right? Same for me. So
Yeah. Yeah. I love saying, I would never wish on anyone else. I don't know that I'd go through the actual ordeal
yeah,
again,
right.
but man, I don't know that I would change the journey
Mm.
because there's so much good, so much perspective that has come out of that. And, I'm 12 years removed. Like I said, I still suffer, I still have pain, I still struggle. But my perspective, I grew up in a household. I love my parents, but I'm first generation. Mental health was not really a thing we talked about. Chronic pain, physical pain wasn't something that was very openly discussed in either of their cultures. And I now sit here in my mid 30s and I'm like, wow, I have a level of empathy that when I talk to people, when I, when I'm talking on a stage, or when I'm talking with business owners, there's a level of empathy I now have that I can say, I don't know what you've been through, but what you've been through matters to me.
Mm.
Let's talk about it.
Mm.
And that's a part of my journey that I don't think that I would have ever connected to myself in business, in life, in relationships, if I hadn't gone through something that was traumatic like that. So
It's the nurture in you, right? That you feel for other people, right? You kind of, like I said, I don't understand your pain because your pain was different than my pain, right? But I understand that when you said I felt alone, I understood that because it's when you're in physical pain, it is your pain. No one else owns it, right? No one. I mean, no matter what they say, it's like, oh, I want to help you. The pain, the feeling of that pain is unique to you, right? And we all learn how to adapt to pain. I'm sure your pain tolerance is a lot stronger than most other people. Tell me I'm wrong on that.
uh, honestly, I would say probably a little bit higher than it used to be for sure.
Because you learn. One of the things people go, "Oh, you're not in pain." I'm like, I'm used to it. It's just what
Mm.
it is. Like sometimes I get cramps along all my legs from the front to the back, and they're like the size of grapefruits, and
Uh,
all over my legs. And about a couple of years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I almost had to go to the hospital, but I held out. I was like, I can go through this. But it's something that, and one of the things that I realized, and I tell everybody, like if I make somebody do push-ups or something, and they're like, oh, it hurts. I'm like, hey, guess what? Be grateful. You're alive. You're
mm.
alive. So sometimes feeling the pain tells you you're alive, because if you didn't feel the pain, you'd be dead. So be grateful for the little things that we have. So an incredible journey you went through. How long were you in that situation for?
Yeah, so I mean, in the aftermath of the accident, that first year, I really didn't know what I was navigating. I had no idea. No grid for depression, no grid for chronic pain. And, I'm getting these headaches they're incapacitating. I could be out 15 minutes. I could be out 3 weeks. I had to leave my job because, you can't, nobody can rely on you. I was working for a company where they would fly me across North America to do speeches and to talk to people about products. And I couldn't do that anymore. And so that deal in that form probably lasted for, probably I want to say 4, maybe 5 years. And it took me a bit I don't want to say build that resilience, but tap into it. Because again, I think for so long, my perspective just got so clouded and so dark. And, for me, I thought, man, my life is over as I know it. I'm like, I'm an eternal optimist. I'm an extrovert. I'm an A type. I want to be around people doing things. And here I find myself. I can't leave my house most times. Somebody can knock me out. If I even want to consider the prospect of a family or a romantic partner, then, they might have to take care of me. All of these things I'm weighing left, right, and center under this guise that my life is over. I'm resigning myself to the fact that this is my future and something had to change.
Wow, such emotions. I can only imagine what you went through. Now, when you talked earlier about your parents' heritages, are your parents from different heritages?
Yeah. My mother's from Guyana and my dad is from Iran. He's Persian.
There you go.
So very different.
You have a beautiful mix then.
I do. I'm very fortunate, very blessed.
Yeah, nice. So what do you speak besides English?
French. I actually failed on both accounts. Yeah. So, they tried when I was younger, but I was into sports and building things. And so it's one of the deep regrets I have. I love language. I love culture, and not being able to communicate in either tongue is it's rough.
Yeah, it's earlier you talked about speaking on a stage and so forth. So what I want to get to is we're going through the resiliency of you fighting through this whole thing, not only physically, right, but mentally. One of the things that I probably should be dead 10 times, or maybe I have more lives than a cat. Let's put it that way. So can you imagine that? So one of the things that I had both my scapulas ripped in my back, right? And during that time, I understood that in order for me to get better, I had to go through the pain. They had to re-rip my scapulas because they started healing incorrectly. So they had to re-rip them. And it was 3 times a week they had to do this therapy on me, right? And the person turns around and goes to me, and they look in the mirror, they see my face, they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, why? What's the matter?" They're like, "You have no expression. You don't have an expression of pain or anything." I'm like, "Trust me, what you're doing is less pain than what I feel every day. So please don't stop, because I know what you're doing is helping me." So
Yeah, wow.
like, "Wow, you're weird." I'm like, "Yeah, I know," because of all the other things I've suffered in my life. So it doesn't make sense for us to dwell on the pain. It makes sense for us to see the outcome, right? And that's what I was seeing when I was going through that time. It's, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, because you think you're causing me pain, but you're actually helping me through this process, right? So you went through all this, and then somehow you started transforming into you, right? Like a new you was born, like a phoenix, if you will, right? So tell us about that transformation, and who, if anyone, was there to kind of give you some guidance.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think anyone was there to give me guidance as much as all the things of people that had guided me in the past really just came full circle. But, I do have an incredible group of friends that was always really, really present, really,
Mm,
really, really, really empathetic and caring towards my situation. But rather than a big shift, I remember one conversation in particular that changed my life. And, I was talking with someone, we just went out for coffee, and, you know, and it was during the conversation that they started to voice some things that just shocked me. They started voicing, that they battled chronic depression, that they actually were suffering from an illness, a chronic illness that was invisible, but, that was quite life altering for them, right? Really was changing to the trajectory. And I sat there in shock because I've known this person for a while. And I basically said, like, I've never seen this before. I've never
Mm,
seen you even show pain. Like,
mm,
why have you never said this before? And they leaned in and they said, I've actually never told anyone, in our circle. And it's really, really terrifying. But the reason I'm telling you is because you've opened up to me about your pain.
wow.
And it was in that moment that I recognized that I was like, the pain that I went through, again, it goes back to that talk about we started this conversation with. I get to have a perspective on failure. I get to choose that. No one gets to choose that for me. And I would say the same is true about pain. And
Mm,
for the first 4 years, my perspective on pain was it sucks. And it is demoralizing and defeating, and I hate it. And I'm not going to sit here and say that pain doesn't suck.
right.
But I do find pain as a useful tool. And that conversation really shifted it for me where I said, wow, maybe my pain can serve a purpose. Maybe I can find the purpose in my pain. And maybe the purpose isn't just to launch me down this road of for myself, being an entrepreneur or to better my life. I mean, there's definitely a part of that. But what if the purpose is actually to serve others around me as well? What if the
Mm,
purpose is that, just in being vulnerable, I can have conversations that help people? Maybe from a stage, I can inspire people, whatever that looks like, whether it's in a coffee shop or on a platform. And that conversation, again, it was never on my grid, right? I didn't sit here, I'd see motivational speakers, I'd see all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's not my story. And all of a sudden, while that may not have been my story, I had a story. And
mm,
I had a story that was not one that I was raised with, not one that I grew up with, but it's one that I lived. And so I found that moment was one that was really pivotal for me and really started to launch a lot of business related things, a lot of personal related things, just because, again, that moment uncovered, okay, my pain isn't just for me. Maybe it's actually for people too.
mm. Yeah, that's very well put, because when we consider that our story can impact someone who, and we don't know, like you said, you were surprised by your friend, right? You're having coffee and they opened up to you and you never imagined it. And your story can change somebody's perspective to say, hey, you know what? I can get through this. I too am in pain. And sometimes it's a communication that we have with ourselves. And when I started having those communications with myself when I was a little kid, that's what made me create the business that I've opened recently. It's called Speaking Prowess, right? Where I have speakers from all over the world, part of our platform, come in and share their knowledge about communication. Because the communication that we have with ourselves is probably the most impactful one. Even though you said you didn't really have people when you were going through it, you had a lot of great people around you, but the communication, that the person that helped you the most was yourself, right? It's that self-talk, that concept of, I can get through this. A lot of times people go, well, I'm going to get through it for the next month. No, I want to get through it for the next 10 minutes, right? Especially when you're going through, especially when you're having your headaches, right? When you're like, holy cow, I don't know if it's going to last me an hour or 3 weeks, like you said before. But you
Yeah.
probably were saying to yourself, man, if I can just get this to go away for the next 20 minutes, I'll be okay, right? So it's that little self-talk that for some strange reason actually is a healing aspect when we communicate the right words to ourselves, right? But if we said, oh man, I'm never going to get through this, then that's going to only make it worse. Instead of saying, oh, if I can only get through the next 10, 20, 30 minutes, I'm going to be happy about it. So I think success a lot of times is what we make it at the moment, right? So it says that we have a call now at this point. Kind of weird. It popped up. No, we're already talking. So the success, I think, is different for everyone, and we should never look at someone else's success and envy it, right? Because we need our own success, right?
It's so funny that you say that. One of the main things I ask my clients, one of the first two conversations I ever have with them is I always say, what does success look like for you? And it can't be a number base, right? That they can't say $1 million. They can't say that, right? It's got to be a quality base. What does success look like for you? And I walk them through this exercise where I say, and it's weird for a lot of people, but I say, just trust me for a second. If you don't like it, you can walk away after this, but close your eyes. Place yourself where you want to be. Who's in the room? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it taste like? And they go on this journey. When they come back, it's incredible how often they're able to communicate. Success for me looks like spending more time with my family. Success for me looks like turning my cell phone off at 5 p.m. and no one being able to reach me. And at the end of it, I go, would you have said that to me had we not done this exercise? And they go, no. Because the definition of success, it's so easy to get lured in by, you could be in a cafe and you look at someone else, you're like, success looks like the bag they have, or the car they're driving, or what's in their bank account, or, a mentor of mine who ascended to the top of the mountain, what they did. When you ask the question, what does success look like? And you get honest with yourself, that's when we can create a roadmap. That's when you can really start to say, and your self-talk starts to align. Your self-talk starts to go, okay, well, if this is what success looks like for me, my inner dialogue, is it feeding that? Is it fueling that? And so that's just the journey that I went on and that I really started to help others with.
Yeah, without a doubt. Mandy, thank you so much for joining us, and Bernard as well. He says hello again. He was on my show earlier. And Mandy says success is different to each. Totally agree. So when we consider, and you said, don't tell me a number, because if I say, hey, listen, success is having $10 million, and I'm going to go, okay, boom, right? Like if a genie came out and gave you $10 million, but then you're at the same time, you're in a hospital bed. What is that, right? Or what if you're locked up in jail, but you have $10 million in the bank? Is it in your hands? Are you in a moat with a bunch of alligators? What does success really look like? So one of the things that people need to do with success, and you hit it dead on, is you need to envision what that truly is for you, right? What does it mean? And like Mandy says, what is it in your heart? And also Bernard says the flower of life. So when you consider all of the different things that you've been through, what has success been for you, Matthew?
Yeah, the best I can describe it is success for me looks like leaving people better than I found them. Whether that's
Powerful.
entrepreneurs, whether that's friends, whether that's family, I want to leave people better than when they first came into my life. And so that's going to look different for every person, but that is something that I commit to. And I think that, we started this conversation under the guise of relationship. And I think that relationship is always going to be the answer or the antidote to the problem. And so, yeah, if I can leave people better than what the way I first encountered them, I think that's what success is going to look like for me.
So you had this coffee with a friend, and they opened up to you, and then you realized, holy cannoli. I don't know. I think I like cannolis. My story can impact. At what point did you realize that your story can become more than you, bigger than you, right? Because your story, your accident, and If you go back to Kung Fu Panda, Master Segway or Egway, whatever his name was, he said there are no accidents, right? I'm going back to a kid's movie, but it was a
Good
good
throwback.
movie.
Good throwback.
Yeah. So there are no accidents, right? Everything is for a reason. We're put on this earth to cultivate the paths that are given to us. And sometimes there's going to be a roadblock. We may have to take a detour. But our goal is going to be the same no matter it's put in front of us, no matter how many detours we face. So when did you realize that I can take my story and actually not only help other people, but now it can become a business for me?
Yeah, I honestly, I think, well, in terms of the first question, I think it was that conversation. That conversation was a catalyst for me where I went, okay, because again, I didn't understand. I didn't have a grade for what empathy and vulnerability could unlock. And so just to share my story and see someone else respond in that way and it kind of open up their heart and unlock, I went, whoa. And that's how I started to live. And that was a real paradigm shifter for me. But from the business perspective, it wasn't until I got into my most recent endeavor now as a business coach and consultant that I started to say, look, there's no shortage of information in the world. There's no shortage of podcasts that people can listen to. There's no shortage of books people can listen to. I may have something new to offer, but the chances are highly unlikely. But what I can do is I can present maybe rather than a different message, a different method in how to communicate that. And so what would it look like if I coached and consulted with people from a place of vulnerability, from a place of empathy, from a place of, hey, I've been there. I'm not just spouting a theory. I have built businesses and organizations this way. And here's what I learned. What are you going through? A few of my clients joke all the time that they're like, we feel like you're our business therapist at times. And for me, I'm like, it's not about that. I'm definitely not qualified to do that. But it's important that rather than shove the 7-step framework down someone's throat, it's more important that I understand their context. What are your struggles? What are you afraid of? Right? One of the best questions I ask, I think, is I try and get to what a business owner or a leader's fear is, because if that's your fear, well, then it's going to get in the way of what your idea of success is. So let's confront that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I
And
love it.
so, yeah, I feel like that's been a big shift is, I'm very honest with people in that from my perspective, I just want to lead, especially with my clients, but also in my life from that place that I've been and that vulnerability, because I think I've seen it over and over work again in so many different contexts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things that you talk about is what is it that you fear? But a lot of times, and I know that you probably get into it also, is where did that fear come from, right?
Mm.
Some people have the fear of success. Some people have the fear of money. I had a client who made lots of money. She made $10 million, but she didn't think she was worth it. So she couldn't keep the $10 million year in, year out, until she realized that she was actually worth it. She started making way more than 10 million and was able to keep a large percentage of it and not blow it and not, how can I put it this way? Not realize that she deserved it, that she worked hard for it, and she was smart enough to keep it, but she never gave herself the value that she deserved, right? So when you started your venture to become a business coach, and what other coach are you?
A business coach and strategic consultant.
Nice, nice. So when you decided to take that on, you created your website. I'm going to share that here with everybody, so everybody can go to your website, right? Let me just pull it up here, and that's that one right there. What can people find when they come to your website?
Yeah, when people go to my site, there's different aspects of my practice. I like to tell people that I function as a hybrid. You know, as a business coach, I'm helping entrepreneurs, business owners, high performing leaders work with a lot of mindset things. What we're talking about right now, and we're talking. People have analysis paralysis. They feel stuck. They feel anxious. They have fears that they have not addressed, and they don't know who to talk to around. And so I help them work through those things on the coaching side. And so when you go to my site, it's going to speak to those things that you struggle with, right? What does success actually look like? What am I building for? What's my why?
Mm.
And then on the flip side, as a consultant, one of the things that I realized is, well, that's great, but there's very little accountability and implementation, it feels like, for a lot of my clients. And so on the consulting side, I now help them, okay, so you have this fear. How do we build a system? How do we build a structure? How do we build processes that enable you to overcome your fear? Because it's one thing for us to have dialogue. It's one thing for us to have conversation, but it's another thing to execute on that conversation. And so I marry the two. And that's why I say I'm a business coach and a strategic consultant, because we get to have strategy and we get to have the implementation at the same time. And throughout my site and really all just my content, I try and address those fears or reverse engineer those fears so that people can feel seen and they can place themselves in, oh wow, yeah, this is me. Maybe this is something I should explore.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking at your site. It's consultingbyprime.com/podcast. That tells me you have a podcast.
Oh no, sorry. The podcast link is just for anyone who comes to the podcast. I want to give them a free gift, but the website is just consultingbyprime.com. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So I don't want to confuse anybody, but so you
No,
don't
no,
have a podcast yet, right?
I don't have a podcast yet.
I like the word yet. Yet is such a powerful word because it lets people know, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm only making $600,000 and my goal is 1 million, but I don't have it yet. Now I have to take action steps, right? Or I'm looking to go on vacation and I want to, travel for a month, but I don't have enough saved yet. So there again, once again, so that's why it's such a powerful word when we use it. And when anybody ever says to me, "Oh, I can't do that," I said, "What's the word that's missing?" And they're like, "They don't know." I'm like, "Come on, put it in there. Yet, you can't do that yet." Yeah. So some people, yeah, maybe they can't do a full split. I'll say yet, and they're like, "I'll never be able to." I said, "How do you know? Did you try? Did you try?" And they're like, "Well, I'm already 50 something." I'm like, "Yes, so? And what's your
Yeah.
excuse?"
Come on.
Right?
Like, who told you couldn't, right?
Yeah, you did. And you listen to, maybe somebody did say you can't do that, and you actually listen to them. So reframe, like, yeah, I get to also, right? Thank you for that. So try again for always. The important thing I think that I'm hearing you say is that we all have a story. We all have a story, and your story can impact somebody because maybe the experience is not identical, but somebody may be going through what you already went through. This is what makes you a great coach because you're not going to reinvent the wheel. Like you said earlier, it's the same stuff is all out there, but you have a different take on it. It's your take because of your experiences. No one, and when you went through your thing, I told you, I can't even fathom what you went through because I didn't go through what you went through, right? It's just like when somebody says, "Yeah, man, I know exactly what you went through." No, you don't. No, you don't. Don't even go there. There is no possibility of you ever knowing what I went through, right? Because we all have different takes on how things are. So what I'm hearing you say is that your story matters and everybody's story matters, no matter what your story is. And I love the fact that you made a decision similar to your dad to have empathy, to understand the power of the lessons you learned when you were young, right?
Yeah.
Back to your dad will always be there no matter what. And I'm sure your mom as well, right? The impact of their lessons, whether they were direct or indirect, but your vision of them doing something. I also say one of the biggest coaches that I've ever had in my life were the ones that hurt me the most, the ones that never thought of helping me, but only thought of hurting me. And I realize that those are lessons as well. A lot of people don't look at those, and they see it in a negative way. And at the moment, yeah, when you're going through it, man, you don't want to go through that stuff when somebody's hurting you on purpose. But later on, you go, how did I act from that? What did I take away from that, right? Would you mind sharing some of that?
Yeah. I don't know that I've experienced it in the same way, but I think for me, looking back, I think the profound moments for me, outside of again revisiting some of the wisdom that I've had over the years, is actually just, and I know it's a little cliche, is to really lean into, some of those words or those things that were spoken about, limitations for me, or being in the doctor's office and them saying, you might be in a wheelchair, you know, and replaying those things over and over in my head. And, whether we call it fuel or motivation, it really gave me a lot of power to recognize that I actually have the power. I can make a decision, right? You know, you give the example of the splits. It's like at the end of the day, it's like I get to decide if that's possible or not. And even if it's not, I'm going to exhaust every option to see that it's possible. And so I think for me, it's taking those moments and reminding myself of those moments, not too much because I think you can overdo it, but of those moments where I was told, hey, it doesn't look good, or this doesn't look great for you, or this is limiting, and leaning into those things. I think that those moments in particular have served as good fuel for different seasons, not for a lifetime, because I think you run the risk of being really negative and well, I'm going to overcome everything instead of just living. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. When you when you take on a new client, what is your biggest goal in helping them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's going to be very similar to what I kind of said that my motto or my mantra is. I think that when someone entrusts me with their business or their organization, I want to leave them in a better place than when they first came to me. And that better place can seem vague on the outside, but it's really, really specific with that person. Because one of the first things I do is I say, again, I ask them two questions, and usually one of the two is, what does success look like for you? And so if we don't reach that success or we measure that success, then to me, I haven't done my job. And so I want to take people on a journey. I like to use the term workflow. I get everyone, all my clients, they despise me in the beginning for it, but I get them the workflow. I get them the workflow success, right? There's just everything's got a starting point and it's got an end point. Our lives have a starting point, they have an end point. And I like to use the GPS as an example. If you open your GPS, there's a start point, there's an end point, but there's so many ways to skin a cat. There's so many ways to get to your destination. The reason why I want you to workflow, the reason why I want you to draw out where you've been and where you think you're headed is because A, we're going to try and find the most effective. We're going to try and be the most efficient. And it's also going to give you something that isn't finite. This can change. But rather than it be in your head or just be, something that's in the air, we've got it on paper. We've got something that, okay, this is where I'm starting and this is where I'm going. Things can change. Even the where I'm going can move, but at least that.
Oh, I lost you for a second. So while Matthew comes back, Matthew, I lost you for a second. So You're kind of frozen a little bit. So I, I was loving what you're saying, man. You are such a powerful speaker, and I can only imagine the kind of coaching that you do, and you're very heart centered, is what I'm getting at, right? You're helping so many people really advance their stage in their life where they are. So, like I was saying, I lost you for a second. I was loving what you're saying, but what I'm gathering is that, and like I just said, you're helping people advance the stage of their life, right? Because I know you're a public speaker as well. I think you're frozen again. Oh, yeah. And yes, and Mandy says you're very easy to listen to as well. So I think you're back. You're back.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
no, I heard what you were saying. I really appreciate that.
yeah, no problem. So what's the message that you like to deliver when you are doing your public speaking aspect?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've been doing recently is I want everyone to find their why. I want everyone to find the why behind the what. We're all doing things. That's the what. Right?
Mm.
We're working, we're living, we're eating junk food sometimes. We're all doing the what, right? But what's the why? And the why for a lot of people, because again, that is a little bit of a predominant thought. People say, well, what's your why? What's your purpose? I heard a friend talk about the 5-step process, the 5 whys, and I really started to adopt that with my clients because it's this idea that, and you touched on this, if I can get to the most accurate why, then it's going to make my what and even my how that much better. I'll give you an example. Someone comes to me, hey, what's your why? I want to make $1 million. We both know that's not a great why. And so I go, why? Oh, I want to make $1 million so that I can go on vacation and live a great life. Why? Because I want to be able to not have to worry about money, and I want to have freedom of time. Why? Because I didn't have money before, and I hated how that felt. Why? Because that's how I grew up. I grew up in a family where we didn't have a lot, and I didn't get to experience a lot of things, and so I resolved within myself, whether I vocalized it or not, that I wasn't going to live that kind of life. 5 whys. And usually by the time I get to the 4th or 5th, it's something emotional. It's something that's a root cause for them. And they went from, I want to make $1 million, which, hey, if you want to do that, that's great for you. But when we get to why. And so that 5 why exercise has been really, really powerful. And if I can help people in my speaking find their why, then their what will get better. Their how will get better. And they'll live out of more conviction so that when hard times come, when failure comes, when rejection comes, when all these things happen, it's not that they're immune to it, but they have a conviction that, what, my why is bigger than my what. And so at the end of the day, things are going to come, things are going to happen, but I'm going to keep trucking.
Yeah, I love the 5 whys. Sometimes I've actually had to ask almost 10 because I believe the why needs to have the emotional content behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, or the emotional component, if you will, because a lot of people they'll just say things, right? But then when we get deeper and deeper with the why, and then all of a sudden there's emotion that gets connected to their why. And I think once they start to connect it, then they can take action. Because prior to them understanding their why, or even maybe they kind of knew it, but they don't verbalize it. They don't hear it with their own voice, right? They hear it internally, right? So a lot of people, we do this self-talk, right? And in the past, right, you have earbuds on, I have ones also. In the past, if you saw somebody on the street before earbuds were out, you would say, man, that person is a little woo, right? They're a little crazy. They're talking to themselves. They're yelling. They're moving around. They're walking across. And as kids, we used to see people like that. Not that I used to be in a Looney Tune neighborhood, but once in a while, you'd see somebody like, oh, look at that person. They're crazy. But that is something that we're all missing, because we will speak internally. But when do we actually listen with our ears about our whys? So when someone like you, let's say I came as a client and I said, Matthew, I need help. I need my business to get there. How can you help me? And you start asking me all the whys. Maybe I've said them to myself, but now you're making me verbalize them. And it's like, holy cow, I'm actually hearing it for the first time. Even though I've thought of it, but I've never heard it. And it's my own voice. I think the best salesperson that I've ever met was the one that gets someone to convince themselves that they need it, right?
Mm.
Earlier, we talked about need and want, right? You need food, you want junk food. So there it is again, right? So why do you convince yourself you need the junk food? Makes me feel good. I like the way it tastes. And then we're going to, what's it going to do to you? Oh, it's going to make me not be in shape. It's going to do all these different things. So the whys and the whats kind of play a role together, right? Because you mentioned that the what is important, but when you get the why to be much bigger than the what, and you attach the emotional component to it, I think that's really what drives home what you're all about, right? Your purpose.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I really love that because, again, I agree with you. I think there's got to be that emotional component. And, in my exercise, I usually find it in the fourth or fifth kind of why. But if people don't tap into that, then that why, whether justified or not, is really shallow. And you want a why that is a firm foundation so that when things happen, you can tap into, oh, I get this. And you're right, right? Getting people to vocalize is half the battle, right? I have this conversation with people all the time and say, did you know that? And they'll say, yeah, I knew that, but I haven't told anyone, or I haven't thought about that in 10 years. I've buried it.
Right,
And I'll
right.
say, well, you need to revisit that. That's a huge component. We can sit here and we can talk marketing all day. You can go hire all the employees, but whether you're at 1 million or 10 million, that why is going to follow you around.
Mhm.
And so let's figure out what that is and how we're going to help fuel it rather than just keep going status quo.
Yeah. And I think the truth of your why comes out too, because a lot of times we've been lying to ourselves, right? As to the why I'm doing this. And then the reality will come out when you explore it the way you do it. I love what you're doing. But what can I say? We're about to be done with this episode, but I think I need you on my other shows as well, my friend. And definitely you have such great knowledge. And one of the things that Mandy said is that you're easy to listen to because you're well spoken, right? And one of the things that I do is I have a communication school. Hello, that's important, right? Without the proper communication skills, how can you help anybody, right? I think that's one of the things, and you understand communication, I think, from a deeper level, like we talked earlier, than most people do. So kudos to you. What would you say you can give as a giveaway, like a thought for somebody to take for the rest of the day, or even the week or the month or the
Yeah.
year?
Listen, I love what we were talking about earlier. With my story, it took me 4 years to find the purpose in my pain. And the reality is that as humans, we're all going through pain. Let's acknowledge it. We go through physical pain, emotional pain, whether we like it or not. But if we can resolve to find the purpose in our present pain, our past pain, and even our future pain, I think it's going to unlock so many things in our lives and the lives of people around us. If we just make that resolution, we resolve right now to say, I'm going to try and find purpose in my pain. Maybe that means I need to talk about it more. Maybe I need to change my inner talk. Maybe I need to go see a therapist or a counselor. Whatever that looks like. Resolve to find purpose in your pain and see what it does to your life.
Yeah. Stop pushing it aside and actually acknowledge it, right? Thank you so much. I really I enjoyed our conversation today. Everybody, thank you for watching us. Mandy, I really appreciate you being here with us. And when we consider pain, we all go through it. We all go through it. And it's just acknowledging it is important. So thank you for that. And I truly appreciate you, my friend. Do me a favor, hang around. We can say goodbye to everybody. Take care, everybody. See you soon.